Hello, beautiful people. My name is Emma.
And I'm MC.
And we are your hosts of the G Forces podcast. So today we are getting ready for the Miami Grand Prix. It is in a week's time. And I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely happy that we have this little bit of a break.
Oh my gosh, it was much needed.
We were able to have a weekend to ourselves. But yeah, no, I'm excited. It's always a fun time. The celebrities are out in masses, which always makes me laugh. I do think they're gonna probably drop like the F1 movie stuff more.
Oh, 100%. I don't think I get as annoyed by the celebrities by more than like the influencers kind of piss me off because I see like last year. I don't want to hate on anybody, so I'm not going to say anything in particular, but there were just like a bunch of New York influencers who like clearly know nothing about F1 that weren't. This happens every, like, a lot of races where influencers who clearly know nothing about F1 get invited, and then F1 content creators, I'm not talking about us, but I'm more talking about like the bigger F1 content creators, they typically are not invited, and that's what frustrates me because like these are people who dedicate their time, their free time, to doing F1 or motorsport content, and they typically are not invited, and that frustrates me. But then like beauty and like fashion people are invited, and I'm like, what? Why?
Yeah, I mean it's tough because sometimes it does feel a little bit like it's used for like a venue for a brand trip. Like I know that a lot of brands
Tarte
buy
did
spaces.
it last year.
Yeah, so it's definitely probably very like American. I feel like it's just like a walking talking ad, but
I feel like that's the majority of the F1 race.
Yeah.
All 3 F1 races in America are very American.
Yeah, in different ways.
Very different
ways. But no, it's always a good time. There's the fake marina, which always makes me laugh.
Yeah.
I always wonder by the end of the weekend how hot that water is. I wonder because it's supposed to be getting pretty hot here in Nashville in the next week.
Oh my goodness, it's probably gonna be so hot in Miami.
Yeah, so we're hitting like the 90s, and we're not like super close to Florida. Like it's probably the equivalent. Like Miami is probably like 14 plus hours, I think, because my friends have driven from there.
I don't know. It was like a 2.5, 3 hour plane ride.
Yeah, so I wonder how hot it's gonna be this coming weekend, how humid.
It's the humidity, I think, that gets people. Even the airport was humid.
Yeah.
I'm not even joking.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's Florida. It's just
humid.
It's humid.
It's a swamp.
It's a swamp, yeah.
So,
but,
yeah. I don't know why every time I hear the word swamp, I just think of Shrek. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Anyways. So, today, I am going to be going over an old race. So, I'm actually going to be going over a race that one of our subscribers had suggested a couple of videos ago. They have commented before on our videos. I believe their name is Patina, and they've commented a while back, so they've definitely followed us for a while. So thank you so much for that long support. So I'm going to be covering the 2005 US Grand Prix, which there is a lot to chat about because it's a little crazy. Obviously, that did not take place at Miami because Miami's existed for like 3 years. And so I just more wanted to go over a race that happened in the U.S. And obviously that one did. And I don't think I don't think F1 will ever go back to this track ever again. So.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. What are you doing?
So I am also throwing it back. I'm throwing it back to the beginning of F1. And I'm going over the driver Harry Schell. He's
as in Schell oil?
No, as in SCHELL.
Oh, it's SCH?
Yeah.
I thought it was gonna be SHELL.
No. But he was an early American F1 driver. Family kind of had a history of motorsport, but I wanted to just go over the handful of American drivers. At least one of them, because Miami's a new race. It's not that old. And I was like, oh, maybe one of the retired drivers or someone that's not on the grid was one of the first winners, and I can go over them. And I'm pretty sure it was like Max. won.
Max won the first 2 years, and then Lando won last year.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, never mind. I was like, that idea is thrown out the window, but
Yeah.
it's fine.
It's
So,
whatever.
Yeah, he short career. Well, not short. I guess like 10 years in F1 is fairly long. First 10 years.
It's pretty long, especially during that time period.
Yeah,
To stay alive for that long?
Tragic in many ways.
Oh God.
So
did I just have a bad omen?
I mean, it doesn't end well. So.
Oh Lord. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, in that case, we're gonna get started.
Yeah.
And we're gonna start with the depressing one, and then end with mine, which is the gossip.
Oh my gosh.
The tea. All right, we're gonna get into it.
So, Harry Schell is like another one of those drivers, and I feel like I haven't done one of these in a while that is on one of that one website that I've talked about, like forgotten F1 drivers.
Honestly, Forgotten F1 Drivers needs to sponsor us.
Yeah, if they're still, I hope they're still active, but it's kind of
hard to forget an F1 driver nowadays.
Yeah, but he just like, I think it was just such a crazy time in F1 when it first started. Like, there were so many random rules. I mean, you start to kind of realize like it was just like a mess. So like I'm kind of going over like a very high level view of his career and his life. And also he is an American driver, but he's not like he was born and raised in France. But he is an American driver. His parents were American.
Was he born on like a military base or something?
I don't know if he's born on a military base, but like he ended up fighting for the American military in World War II. Like, I don't know. Anyways,
I'm guessing he was born on a military base then.
Something like that. I don't know.
Did they explain what his dad did?
He was just in race driving too. Anyways, okay. So, born Harry O'Reilly Schell in Paris, France on June 29th, 1921 to an American father and an American heiress mother who loved motorsports, Harry was sure to fall in love with cars. Not much is said about him growing up, but between 1939 and 1940, he had joined the Finnish Air Force, and then after Pearl Harbor, he would join the American military. Prior to the outbreak of World War II and the German occupation of France, where he was living, his parents got into a really bad car accident, and unfortunately, his father lost his life, and his mom was pretty badly injured. His mom, herself sounded kind of incredible. She, was very involved in, like, early motorsport. She herself drove.
Oh, cool.
I think she had money, it very much gives the energy of, like, the Downton Abbey.
I was gonna say, this feels like Downton Abbey.
Yeah. Some articles stated that once the Germans started to occupy France, his mother moved them, he had a younger brother, to the US around 1940, probably after his service in the Finnish Air Force and obviously before Pearl Harbor. Please know when Pearl Harbor happened, guys. And if you don't, look it up. Post-World War, Harry would stay in Europe.
Are you meaning like the actual date of when Pearl Harbor happened?
Yeah.
Like the year and date? You're assuming everybody knows the year and date?
Well, I hope. If you're American.
I think I know the day and around what year, but I don't know what year exactly.
Okay, well, sorry.
Now I feel stupid. Okay, continue.
That's not what I was... Anyways. Jeez.
It's okay if you guys don't remember exactly the year, exact year.
Yeah, never mind. Jeez. Sorry. Now I feel attacked. Post-World War, Harry would stay in Europe and race in some Grand Prix and what was kind of like F2 back then with a Cooper, which is a type of car, under his own team, Schell Racing Corp. Motorsports.com had an archived article from, I think, the 90s, which basically said that this was a team made up of Harry and occasionally assisted by his brother Philippe. So, like, it wasn't a very extensive team.
That would be like us putting together a team.
Yeah. Harry would make his F1 debut not in the first ever F1 race, but the second, the 1950 Monaco Grand Prix. Apparently, he had done very well in a support race that weekend, coming in second, but fell victim to an 8-car pileup during the main race. In 1954, so during this time, he's in and out of F1. He would bounce around a few teams. And in 1954, Schell would buy a Maserati and I believe privately race in the Grand Prix. So there was a handful of times that he would just be a private driver. He could join the grid. And during this time, he was able to achieve 6th in the 1954 Argentinian Grand Prix. In 1955, after a split from their driver, Harry would begin to drive for the British team Van Wall. Now, at this time in F1 history, not every single Grand Prix was a regulated World Championship Grand Prix. There was just there was ones that you got points, and then there was ones that you just raced. I'm sure there was a purse and awards and whatnot. Basically, they would have them, but again, like I said, they wouldn't have points. He did, however, come first 4 times in non-championship races. So when you look him up on Wikipedia, it says he has 0 wins, but he has 0 F1 wins. In 1956, Harry would continue to race for Van Wall, but as the season went on, it became clear that the British team was going to hire 2 British drivers for the 1957 season, so Harry began to speak to Maserati, who he knew from his private driving days when he was their customer. In 1957, this was not the easiest season, as Harry had lost one of his closest friends, Alfonso de Portago, who passed in a terrible accident during the 1957 Mille Miglia. Schell and Portago had met years earlier and shared an affinity for the party lifestyle. With his passing, many said that this really changed Harry, even though he continued to live a glamorous life. I think this is just that similar situation that a lot of these early drivers had. We've talked about it before. They lose someone really close, or they're involved in a really bad accident, and it is a bit of a wake-up call. While it was a difficult year for him personally, he did have a good season, achieving his best season finish with 8 points that year. Harry would transfer to BRM, which was British Racing Motors, which was a team that was massively struggling at the time. With the hiring of a new engineer and the addition of Harry, he was able to achieve some of his best results ever. He would get 5th place in Monaco and Spa and 2nd in Zandvoort, which was his career best. Between 1958 and 1959, there would be a lot of changes with F1 and the cars in general. There were a lot of changes happening around the engine. It was versus a front and a rear engine. And this didn't go unnoticed by Harry. In 1967, he would join Yeoman Credit Racing Team.
1957 or 1967?
1957, thank you.
Okay.
Wait, what? In 1960?
You said in 1967.
Oh, in 1960.
Okay.
Sorry. In 1960, Harry would join Yeoman Credit Racing Team, who used Coopers, a car company that Harry was very familiar with. It's what he was driving in his early days. Sadly, Harry would never race in a championship-level race with this team. A few weeks before the 1960 Monaco Grand Prix, Harry was practicing in damp conditions at Silverstone. He clipped a low retaining wall at Abbey Curve, was wearing no harness, and was halfway flipped out of his car. His injuries killed him instantly. Almost 3 years to the day after his friend Alfonso died, it's actually a day apart. I believe Alfonso died May 12th, and Harry died May 13th. At age 38, Harry Schell passed away. While he never did win any races, he had a long, crazy history that show you the early days of racing and how different it was between all of the career changes, the relationships, and honestly, the factor of how dangerous the sport was. Harry Schell would start 56 times in F1 and win a total 32 points in his career. So, an American driver who is honestly I never heard of until
No.
today. Had a pretty extensive career. His mom had, you know, a history of, motorsport. And so, yeah, just another driver of the day that I'd never heard of.
And I'm glad that a lot of well, not glad, but I like how you were able to touch on some of the safety aspects of it, because what I go over, and something that I do want to discuss throughout this episode, is just how safety was not taken seriously for so long in F1, truly. Like, I mean, Jackie Stewart literally asked for a wrench to be put in his car so that if he ever got stuck hanging upside down in his car again, he'd be able to get out with it so he wasn't hanging for hours like he did that one time, I believe, in Spa.
Yeah.
And that was in the 70s. And then you have the 80s where you still had people dying quite frequently during races. And then you have Senna's passing, and that changed a lot for safety. And you could even tell in like the Senna documentary that like safety wasn't really, they didn't really care that much. It was more, this is a business.
Well, it's crazy to think too that, around that time too, you had, like, Lauda's accident that, like,
Yeah.
should have stemmed at the time something so much more than he was unfortunately able to accomplish, not for lack of trying, but and even knowing that there was hemming and hawing over the halos.
That's the thing. So like what I go over happens in 2005, and then Jules Bianchi's accident happens in 2013, and then he ends up passing in 2014. And then yet still in 2017, 2018, when they introduced the halos, there was hemming and hawing. And like even today, sometimes not even just like safety on track, but more of like the weather conditions, but like not like safety on track. Like Brazil last year should have been stopped. Like there's things that happen still that are not okay, and I understand that this is like a tough, really hard sport, and like it is a business at the end of the day, and you can't really just stop and like make people like feel like they wasted their money. But I do think that as spectators, I think safety of drivers needs to be taken in consideration a little bit more.
Yeah.
And then I also just think that the FIA needs to remember we should not be putting people's lives on the line for stuff.
For money.
For money.
Yeah. We'll see. Hopefully improvements will be made. And that's, every year it gets better.
And it's wild that he wasn't wearing a harness at all.
Yeah. And apparently it was like, I mean, when you look at the helmets, it's kind of the same thing if you look at the early days of like American football. Like it was literally just like a soft leather cap.
Yeah.
And some of the helmets in the earlier pictures look more impressive than others. I mean, some they're just in goggles with like a soft cap. The article said it was like a pretty like it wasn't a very like protective helmet. So
I'm sure.
Yeah, but
it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for introducing us to a driver we've never heard of before.
Yeah.
I'm going to get into the 2005 US Grand Prix. All right, there is a lot to go over with this race because a lot happens. So, it's more, not a lot happens in the race particularly, but the drama around the race weekend.
Okay.
So, the 2005 US Grand Prix. From 2000 to 2006, the US Grand Prix was held at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
Okay.
Like I said before, I don't think that a F1 race will ever take place at this track, let alone I don't think an F1 race will ever take place at the same track as an IndyCar race.
Why?
Because of stuff that happened this weekend.
Okay.
So, the track it's called the Infield Road Course, and it looks like it's about partially the oval of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, but also parts of the inside, so parts of the infield, basically. You can look that up. And this was round 9 of 19 for this year's championship. Before the event, the World Drivers' Championship standings were Fernando Alonso in first, and he drove for Renault. In second was Kimi Räikkönen for McLaren, and third was Jarno Trulli for Toyota. Fourth was Nick Heidfeld for Williams, and fifth was Michael Schumacher for Ferrari. So let me remind you guys that at this point in time, there wasn't just one tire supplier for F1. There were multiple, which is why I don't think IndyCar and F1 will ever be held at the same circuit again. So Bridgestone and Michelin were the tire suppliers at this point.
Okay.
Michelin supplied tires for 7 out of the 10 teams, and Bridgestone had 3. Bridgestone was supplying tires for IndyCar, or at that point it was called something else. It was like
CART.
Yeah. Through their company Firestone, because Bridgestone owns Firestone. So they have a bit more knowledge on how to make a great tire for this racetrack.
Oh.
Where Michelin did not.
Okay. I'm catching on.
So, I think this is also partially one of the reasons why they decided that there has to be one tire supplier.
Makes sense.
So, qualifying, I wrote down some qualifying notes, but this is not really anything. The qualifying does not matter at the end of the day. But just a reminder that during the session, each competitor recorded one timed lap with the running sequence set by the results of the previous Grand Prix, reversed. So, pole ended up being Toyota Jarno Trulli. P2 was Kimi Räikkönen for McLaren. P3 was Jenson Button for Bar Honda. And then you can just keep going down the list, but I'm not going to do that. It's too much. Because there's too much controversy. We're on to the controversy now. Okay. During the Friday practice session, Ralf Schumacher had a really bad crash in turn 13 due to a left rear tire failure. He was then replaced because he was basically too injured to carry on.
Okay.
And so he was obviously brought to the hospital, and he was replaced by Toyota's test driver, Ricardo Zonta, who also experienced a left rear tire failure.
Damn.
The year before, Ralph had crashed in turn 13 while driving for Williams because of a tire failure, which resulted in like a broken back. They didn't really elaborate there. I'm guessing some disc problems. That's my guess.
Or vertebrae.
Yeah. So turn 13 is a high-speed banked turn. So it's the corner of an oval for a similar one that you would see today in F1. Think of Zandvoort, the turn that Oscar crashed into a couple years ago, then Danny had to like basically also crash. A very high-speed banked turn. This was unique at the time in Formula One, and it does cause a much larger tire loading. This section of the track had been repaved since the previous Grand Prix with a more abrasive surface, which may have placed the tires under even greater load than before.
Jeez.
I don't know why they did that, but whatever.
Maybe on to slow.
Yeah. On Saturday for qualifying, Michelin said it did not understand why this was happening to the tires they had provided to their customer teams. Again, their customer teams are Bar, McLaren, Red Bull, Renault, Sauber, Toyota, and Williams. They announced that they would be flying in different specifications of tires than the ones that were used throughout the weekend, and it was going to be the ones that they had used at the Spanish Grand Prix in hopes that those would be better. The new tires actually just had the same problem when tested.
Oh, God.
So, Michelin representatives Pierre Dupasquier, I think I'm saying that correct, and Nick Schorak wrote a letter to the FIA race director, Charlie Whiting, and revealed that they did not know the cause of the Toyota tire failures, and unless the cars would be slowed down in turn 13, they could not guarantee the tires' safety for more than 10 laps.
Oh, God.
And at this point, I don't know how true this is. Apparently, you weren't really allowed to change your tires in the race?
That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it said that somewhere, and I was like, hold on. I didn't take the time to look it up again, though. Did not matter with the rest of the drama.
Someone fact check that.
So, Whiting replied on the next day, so that was on Sunday, expressing his surprise that Michelin had not brought suitable tires, but and had not brought suitable tires, suggesting that the teams would limit their drivers to the maximum safe speed specified by Michelin in turn 13. He also addressed several solutions that had been proposed by teams, insisting that use of the new specification tires flown in overnight would be a breach of the rules to be considered by the stewards, and the placement of a chicane in the turn was out of the question. The race would not be sanctioned by the FIA, making it a non-championship race if the track layout was changed. He deemed the Michelin team's proposals to be grossly unfair to the Bridgestone teams.
Damn.
Love some politics. Dupasquier and Chirac wrote a second letter in the same Saturday saying that they would not allow their teams to race on the Michelin tires used during qualifying without changes to the circuit, also reiterating their request to slow down turn 13. Whitting replied again the next day, saying that no changes would be made, and gave the teams the choice of limiting speeds through turn 13, using tires of a different specification to those used in qualifying, subject to a penalty, or changing tires repeatedly, which would have been permitted if a driver's safety were at issue, which means they would have had to change their tires every 10 laps.
That would have made the race 9 years long.
I know. So on June 22nd, so this is after the race takes place, Paul Stoddart, who's the owner of Minardi, who they used Bridgestone tires, published an account of events leading up to the race.
Oh, no.
This needed to happen. I want somebody, one of the team principals or owners of a team, to be this... I don't even know to have this much tea to be able to release. Like,
Fred.
Please be bold. So on June 22nd, Paul Stoddart, the owner of Minardi, like I said, released the account of events. Stoddart had recorded a meeting that had happened at about 10 a.m. on race day, to which Speedway president Tony George, two senior Michelin representatives, Bernie Ecclestone, who was the president and CEO of F1 management and F1 administration at the time, all of the team principals, and the team's Michelin technical representatives were summoned. All invited were present except for Jean Tott, the team principal for Scuderia Ferrari. Jean Tott, this does not paint you in a great light. I'm going to tell you that now, because you're totally listening. The Michelin reps made their case and asked for an installation for a chicane at turn 13. Everyone present discussed and agreed that the idea of making a pit stop every 10 laps, the lifetime of the tires predicted by Michelin, was ridiculous, and that a chicane would make the most sense, and instructed several technical representatives to prepare plans for its installation. Bernie Ecclestone offered to consult Tott, who had not come to the meeting, and the president of the FIA at the time, Max Mosley, who was not present at the race, and reconvened the meeting when he had responses. Ecclestone returned at about 10:55 a.m., so again, the meeting started at 10. It ended, and then it reconvened not even
Holy
55
crap.
minutes after it started. Because Michelin probably presented the problems, and everybody was like, okay, let's be sensible here. And it probably didn't take much discussion.
Yeah.
And so Ecclestone returned at 10:55, saying that Tott refused to agree to the chicane, and said it was an FIA and a Michelin problem and not his. Before Stoddart had published his account, Tott had claimed he hadn't been consulted, but said that if he had been, he would not have agreed.
What?
Mosley also apparently said that if any attempts were made to alter the circuit, he would cancel the Grand Prix forthwith. I know. This is a crazy race. After this, the group still decided that the plan would be to have the race with a chicane and make it a non-championship race. Only problem is that the FIA would pull its staff so they had to elect a delegate to be race director, and there also wouldn't be scrutineering, so everybody had to act honorably, and they were all agreeing to it.
Yeah.
At that point, I think they're like, let's just race. It's race morning.
We're
let's
here.
just race.
Yeah.
And so they presented this to the drivers, and actually none of them disagreed. The Ferrari drivers had no opinion, leaving it to Tott, who wasn't there. Because why would he show up to a meeting that everybody else is at?
My question is, do the drivers actually have no opinion, or did Ferrari tell them to have no opinion?
I mean, it would they benefit in the end, so that's why. The 19 principals who were present then resolved that unless they and the FIA could come to a decision in the best interest of the sport, they would not participate in the race. After a short break, the group gathered again in Ecclestone's office to find Renault team principal Flavio Briatore. But Renault was a Michelin tire team, so he actually wasn't causing a problem here. I'm really quite surprised on that one. He was on the phone with Max Mosley. I think he was trying to convince Max Mosley to
Way to go,
figure it out. I know, this is shocking, truly. Mosley had apparently rejected all of their proposals, and it was stated that Mosley had informed Mr. Martin, the FIA's most senior representative in the U.S., that if any kind of non-championship race was run or any alteration made to the circuit, the US Grand Prix, and indeed all FIA-regulated motorsport and all FIA-regulated motorsport in the U.S. would be under threat.
What a douche move.
Oh yeah.
Ew.
I know. On the same day that Stoddart's version of events was published, the FIA issued a statement denying that Mosley had made that reported threat or that any such conversations had taken place. Let's be real, guys. We all know what took place.
God, it sounds like our supreme
Allegedly. We all know what
leader right
allegedly
now.
took place. For legal reasons, allegedly.
Allegedly.
So the majority of the Michelin team principals decided to have their drivers do the formation lap, but not race for concerns for their safety, obviously. So Minardi, Jordan, and Ferrari were the only teams that were Bridgestone teams.
Okay.
So Minardi and Jordan would attempt to race, though, since they had Bridgestone tires. Ferrari was always going to race. They didn't really give a shit about anybody else. They still had fear. The reason why they decided to race is because they had fears of FIA sanctions, according to Jordan. Minardi really just raced because Jordan was basically their championship rivals. And so with only 4 cars racing, then they were going to automatically get a ton of points. So Minardi was like, okay, well, we have to be the other 2. Then we'll be 6 cars racing. So they decided to race. 6 cars. Out of the formation lap, only 6 cars stayed out. The 2 from each of those 3 teams. So here's part of the problem. Fans had no idea that this was going on. And the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is gigantic. And people in Indiana take motorsport very seriously. I know. I went to school there. They do not joke around about motorsport.
I think that's all of America. Like NASCAR,
but specifically Indy. So, yeah, fans had no idea what was going on because obviously they're not privy to team information. And at that point, it's not like they all have,
it's happened
they had flip phones, but it's not like they can check online to get an alert. So they weren't privy to that plan. By lap 10, thousands of fans had left the race because of this, and they went to the ticket office demanding refunds, but were not granted. It got so bad that police were called to keep the peace. The fans that stayed were booing the whole race and threw beer cans and water bottles onto the track.
I
know. At the end of this race, of the 6 cars that raced, Michael Schumacher won his 84th race. This was all of the Jordan and Minardi's drivers' first point score ever in F1. All they had to do was make it to the end of the race to get some points.
Jesus.
And it was also the first and only time a Portuguese driver has finished on the podium. So that part's kind of cool.
Oh,
Let me remind you, before this race weekend, Schumacher was 5th in the Drivers' Championship. The people who were basically in front of him, all the people in front of him, couldn't race. So he moved up to 3rd.
Oh, damn.
So all this was going to benefit Ferrari, so that's why Jean Todt was like, no.
Yeah.
Sucks for all of you, this is going to benefit me.
Jeez.
Apparently all is not fair in love and war.
No.
Our favorite guy, David Coulthard, called this race a farce. And many other people also have. Even Stoddart, the team principal for Minardi, he was furious with this race. He only had his team race because, again, his championship rivals Jordan was racing, and he said because it was the two Ferrari drivers in P1 and P2, the two Jordan drivers in P3 and P4, and the Minardi in P5 and P6, and he said that they would never recover from this points finish, even though they got points. Because Jordan got P3 and P4, they got so many more points than them. It was like Alpine getting that one podium, getting the double podium in Brazil. The Williams would never be able to catch up to them after that.
That's so frustrating.
Yeah. Oh, it gets worse. It gets worse. So this part I basically copied directly from the website I looked at it at. So I'm going to be reading a lot just from my laptop. So on June 29th, the FIA called in the seven Michelin tire teams to the headquarters, which was in France, and where they were charged with violating 151C of the International Sporting Code, which refers to acts prejudicial to the interests of competition or motorsport generally. Specifically, it was charged that they had 1. Failed to ensure availability of suitable tires for the race. 2. Wrongfully refused to allow cars to start the race. 3. Wrongfully refused to allow cars to race subject to speed restrictions at one corner, which was safe for such tires available. 4. Combined with other teams to make demonstration damaging to the image of Formula One by pulling into the pits immediately before the start of the race. And then 5. Failed to notify the stewards of their intention not to race.
Literally just trying to cover their asses because of all the pissed off American fans.
On June 29th, the FIA found the teams guilty of not being in possession of suitable tires, but with strong mitigating circumstances and failure to allow their cars to start for the race. The teams were not found guilty of the other 3 counts. The punishment was not decided and was to be announced on September 14th. On July 22nd, the FIA voted to overturn its previous decision and exonerated the Michelin teams of all charges. The decision was due to evidence previously submitted to the FIA Senate. According to BBC Sport, Dennis and Red Bull principal Christian Horner told Mosley and the FIA Senate that Indiana state law left the Michelin teams no option but to pull out of the race. They contended that they had competed, they potentially faced criminal charges for knowingly putting others at risk, even if no accident actually occurred. Horner later stated in an interview that whilst it was incredibly difficult pulling out of the race, there were things going on that were bigger than the sport that day. On June 28th, Michelin announced that they would offer compensation to all race fans who had purchased tickets for the Grand Prix. The company planned to issue refund checks through the Speedway ticket office for the price of all tickets for the race by the end of September. Additionally, Michelin purchased 20,000 tickets for the 2000 US Grand Prix to be distributed to spectators who attended the 2005 race. In addition to the refunded tickets, there was some discussion about holding a second non-championship race at Indianapolis. On July 2nd, at the 2005 French Grand Prix, McLaren team principal Ron Dennis suggested that an additional race could be held at the American circuit after the last official race of the season, the 2005 Chinese Grand Prix. The teams had apparently already discussed the idea with Bernie Ecclestone. The next day, Tony George dismissed the possibility, saying there will be no race at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway this fall. Tony George, I believe, was the president of the Speedway. I'm guessing he was probably threatened by Mosley.
That, or it was such a shit show and like it was such a defamation against the Speedway that he was like, I'm not dealing with your shit.
At the Grand Prix of Cleveland, held 1 week after the US Grand Prix as part of the 2005 Champ Car World Series season, free admission was granted to all bearers of ticket stubs of the US Grand Prix. And like I said at the very beginning, might I add, Bridgestone provided tires for IndyCar to Firestone, so they had better knowledge of how to make tires work for this track. So that was the 2005 US Grand Prix. Talk about politics.
Yeah, it's like we get mad about fines, and it's like where that stuff was going on.
I'm sorry, but Ralf Schumacher had a severe back injury, which could paralyze you for life. Any back injury could do that. And it's happening again, where people are having tire issues there, and yet you don't care.
It's so funny because there's so many books and blogs and things about like sports psychology and like the psychology of athletes, when it's like there have been so many coaches who have just been like, "Oh, you're not really injured," or like injuries aren't super important to them. And it's like I'd love to see the psychology of like the people in power of athletes, and like how, especially athletes that make money, how like the way they look at these athletes, if they see them as humans, because it's like
They don't.
And
if anything,
so
we've seen over the years in any form of athletics, the athletes are not seen as humans. They're seen as a way to make money.
yeah, I remember just feeling like a number. Like,
It's
it was
really
just a number.
gross.
Yeah. But wow, that's crazy. I mean, it definitely gives us some perspective of like the FIA we're dealing with today.
Oh, yeah.
Too. So, and just again, you're right. Like, it does give us the perspective of like the importance of safety, not only with the drivers. Like, I feel like the drivers would definitely have protested louder, this
Yeah.
group of drivers today. But just the importance of leadership and how like it has changed for the better.
Yeah.
You know, like sometimes it is hard to, see the forest through the trees when certain issues are so pettily stupid. But it is. We've come far. We need to still go farther. Not only in safety and so many other aspects in the motorsport world, but yeah. Wow.
I have a lot to say, but I'm going to say it in our final thoughts. So, yeah.
Cool.
One of the things that I was thinking about when I was going through the 2005 Grand Prix, US Grand Prix. So, Jean Todt was obviously the villain. one of the four villains in this. I do think that some of them would do the same today. And that's the unfortunate thing. Some of them would say, I don't really care if you're struggling with that. If that's a safety problem for your team, it's not for mine.
Yeah, I definitely think so, but I also don't know. I think, like you said, there was a really important part to bring up. It was 2005. The way news and information is spread these days is so different.
I just unfortunately feel like I could totally have seen this happening with 2023 Red Bull. Because Max was so ahead in the championship, I could have totally seen him being like, we're fine.
I definitely think there's probably certain people that definitely play the villain card better, that it could apply to them. I just think that there are too many voices that would protect their drivers, in my opinion.
I would hope so.
Yeah. But yeah.
I mean, we've seen safety problems that were not necessarily track issues in the 2022 Saudi Grand Prix, and they were all basically forced to race.
I mean, look at, what was it? Was it Qatar 2 years ago?
Yeah.
A bunch of them threw up in their car. So yeah, it's not always a matter of the track. Like, sometimes it is pushing the limits of what the drivers they themselves can do. And yeah, I mean, it's a fine line, but I guess also, I don't know. At the end of the day, it's something that it's a risk in the sport, I guess, that you take when you're not the one fully in control as a driver,
Yeah. I just hope that safety is always taken in consideration.
Without a doubt.
And I just don't think that it always is sometimes. I think that there are I think the majority of the times it is. I do think that there is a small percentage though where they're like, business is business.
Yeah. And I think the thing that is upsetting, especially as a spectator, is the unfortunate, frustrating, angry hive mind that the people at the Grand Prix can, feel. The way they were so angry that only 6 cars were on the track. Now, am I saying that I wouldn't be frustrated and angry if I didn't know what was going on? I don't know, but it is. It's a tough world to like you're in a rock and a hard place, probably as everyone in the situation. You know, and it is interesting too that in your telling of it that there weren't any like real vocalizations from the drivers who they themselves are putting themselves in risk, you know?
Yeah, all the drivers were like, yeah, sure. I think at that point, the drivers were just like, we want to have a good race.
Yeah.
And like, if we want to have a fair race, and it would kind of be sucky if only 3 teams can race.
Yeah. Crazy.
So, yeah, it's definitely an interesting one. The politics of F1 never cease to amaze me.
It really
and how
doesn't.
psychotic it is.
How some things have changed for the better, some things are the same. I personally don't feel like anything. I mean, I'm sure fans that were fans for significantly longer than we are will feel like some things are changed for the worst. But yeah, just I can't imagine that situation today. How it would happen if it would happen.
Oh, it wouldn't be able to happen today.
No.
Like, I think that's why they have one tire supplier, so you don't have a situation like this happen again. But then, like, if there were 7 teams that could not compete, it would be posted on F1 so fast.
Well, not even F1. It would just get out to, like, the gossip channels and, like, all the gossip sites.
It would be everywhere so fast.
Yeah.
So, and because the drivers with social media, because social media didn't really exist back then.
Yeah.
With social media now, the drivers are able to actually vocalize some stuff. And that, like, the GPDA would 1000% post something being like, we boycotted due to the safety of the drivers. Like,
you know what the biggest bullshit of the entire situation is at the end of the day? Is that they could have put in a chicane.
Yeah.
And so, like, I think that is something, too, to take away, is that I think today
they would have made the
track alterations overnight because we've seen them do it.
Yeah.
So I think that's the difference where, yeah, they might not necessarily pull out their driver, but they wouldn't sit there and be obtuse about that type of decision.
Yeah.
But crazy.
I know. So, if you guys listened to our last episode, you know that we talked about, 2 episodes ago, getting ready for Saudi. Yeah?
Sure.
Yeah, getting ready for Saudi. I believe so. That was the episode we talked about a little bit about Lewis Hamilton and the Met Gala. We have been on a hunt for this magazine. Every time I go into a store over the last 2 weeks, I go to the magazine section, seeing if they have it. We went into Barnes & Noble a couple weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, they didn't have it. They probably had just gotten the shipment in, and they were still in the boxes.
Aunts and uncles stopping at multiple Walgreens,
Hudson
News in New York, looking for it.
We had everybody we knew hunting for this magazine. And we went to Barnes & Noble yesterday, and we finally found them. We have 2 copies of it because, of course,
Emma can't share a copy with me. No. Stress her out.
And so I'd like to present to you all.
For those that are watching, for those that are listening, I'll narrate. Emma is now showing
the copy of the Lewis Hamilton Vogue. Guys, this is so exciting, though. It looks like it's got like a picture frame around the edges. Mm-hmm. It's quite nice. I think we should frame it, to be honest. The article, you don't have to have the actual magazine to read the article. You can read it online. I did. But they do have 4 different covers of this because of the 4 different hosts. I only wanted the Lewis one, of course. That's the only one that mattered to me. But yeah, 10 out of 10 recommend.
Yes, Emma's very happy.
Yes, I'm very content about this. Mm-hmm. So, do you have anything else?
No.
We didn't really talk much about Miami itself.
Yeah, no. I mean, Miami's Miami. It's a good time. I feel like every year I go into it kind of like, but then it always ends up being a fun race.
I mean, this was Lando's first win last year, and I loved it.
Yeah, so I'm excited.
I shed a tear.
It's in the States. It's not.
I do love the paddock of it. I know people complain about the paddock being in the actual Hard Rock Stadium, but
yeah, I don't mind it either.
I actually quite like it.
Yeah.
And I like that they open up like the field basically for like as like the paddock restaurants and like a bunch of activities. I kind of enjoy it.
Yeah. I feel like I always end up liking it more than I believe I will. And it's in the States, so it'll be kind of during like our normal time. Maybe
I
we'll
think
do
so.
something. We won't invite anyone over because when we've done that in the past, we barely watch. But
I know it's really we love our friends and we love the people that we've invited over to spectate with us, but it's quite difficult to watch the race at the same time as having people over because they all want to chat, understandably, but we want to watch the race, and so we can't really pay attention to both at the same time.
yeah, maybe we'll like barbecue or something for it.
There is a group in Nashville that watches them all like at a bar together. And we've never gone. We should probably go one of these days. Maybe we'll do that. Who knows?
Yeah, we'll
All
figure
depends on
that
the
out.
timing. So,
It does.
alrighty. Well, I think that's all for today. So, bye, guys.
Bye.